I've benefited a lot from our relationship over the past few years because I think that I pride myself on thinking outside of the box. And most real estate professionals and most consumers only think of an appraiser as someone who handles that process of a purchase, that they're doing the value at that point in time. But I've been very happy to be able to pick up the phone and give you a call whenever I'm working on a problem market analysis and say, give me some insight. Hey everybody, thanks for checking out another episode of the Aaron Advantage podcast. Today I am joined by Appraiser Sam Reid with Appraisal Consultants. Sam, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I am enjoying this early spring that we're experiencing.
Oh, can't beat it.
Yeah, I tell you, whenever I'm talking to people about the weather in Southwest Indiana, my response is always the same. It's, hey, if you don't like it right now, just wait a couple hours. It'll be different. Yeah. And right now we're experiencing the benefits of having a nice, warm, early spring.
Oh, yeah. Sunny and 70.
Cannot beat it. It feels like San Diego because we don't have the humidity yet either. So, Sam, I just wanted to say first and foremost, thanks so much for coming in today. I thought it was imperative as someone in the real estate profession to bring in one of the people in the industry who doesn't necessarily get a lot of FaceTime with the clients, but has a massive impact on the process, which is obviously the appraisal process. Whether it's residential or commercial or other services that are offered, you guys have a lot of value that you bring to the table because you're helping provide that opinion of value. So before we get started on diving into that, I wanted to give you an opportunity to give us a little bit of your background and what got you into the appraisal industry.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Aaron. Well, first and foremost, they always joke that an appraiser gets in through family, and that's case in point. I'm a third generation appraiser.
Right.
Yeah, I've been doing it for, man, we're going on 15 years.
Time flies by, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, I've been in the industry for 15 years. My father and I run and operate a small appraisal business with 4 other guys. We do residential, commercial, and a little bit of everything in between. So
very nice, very nice. So yeah. I know the education requirements to become an appraiser are vastly different from real estate. You know, for a real estate license, you take a 90-hour course and pass a test, and once that's done, you're good to go. Yeah. It's not the same for appraisers, is it?
No, absolutely not. I think at a minimum, you need an associate's degree. Yeah. So they get you on that. And if you're going to go into that commercial, industrial, more general route, you got to have a bachelor's degree. So they get you with the college education. And then once you do that, you still got hours and hours of education and at a minimum, a 2-year traineeship. So.
Yeah. If I remember, correct me if I'm wrong because I don't do appraisals, but it's like 1,000 hours supervised to become an appraiser.
It's 2,000.
2,000 hours.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yeah. So by the time you're ready to appraise on your own, you've got a lot of experience under your belt.
I like to think so. But I will say this, you never stop learning. So, I've been at it, 15 years. I could name on 2 hands the amount of mentors that I'm constantly calling and constantly bugging for recommendations and guidance going forward.
You know, I agree with that statement tremendously. I'm currently teaching the pre-licensing course for people who are thinking about getting a real estate license and going through the process. And I had somebody ask me one night, hey, what's a normal transaction like? And my answer to them is always the same. I've only been doing this for 18 years. I don't know what a normal transaction looks like yet because every one of them's different.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So why don't we dive in a little bit on appraisals? Obviously, I got to know you over the past several years through our association with the Southwest Indiana Association of Realtors.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that appraisers are actually realtor members as well, and you adhere to the same code of ethics that we do and do everything to a higher level of professionalism, which is fantastic. Primarily in the past, you did a lot of residential appraisals, but you're now kind of diving more into the commercial realm. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how commercial differs from residential appraisals and kind of what drew you to doing more commercial work?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think first and foremost, going to, the time of COVID, one thing that opened my eyes is these, for the amount of work that we had during that time, the good times can't last forever. We can't stay this busy forever.
Right.
So I saw the writing on the wall, and I just wanted to diversify my workload. So that is kind of how I got into commercial work. And then, so, it's just been a constant evolution in that regard. Repeat your question.
I was gonna say, I know we did a lot of residential work in the past, but what kind of got you more interested in doing the commercial work as kind of your primary focus at this point? Yeah,
I think the challenge, it can be a bigger problem, and I like the ability to dive deeper into a problem and really find a solution in that world. So, but going back to it, I do a lot of residential work still, and I like the variety of it. I think I have undiagnosed ADHD, and I can't do the same thing for too long. So.
It's funny you mentioned that. I joke with my wife all the time that I'm pretty confident I've got some level of ADHD because I can't sit still. And the good news is representing residential transactions for me, they're all so different that I have enough that kind of scratches that itch for me, but also managing an office and helping, all the other agents at FC Tucker, like they all offer me additional puzzles. I'm like, this is fantastic. This is what I love to do.
Oh yeah, you can't beat it.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
I completely understand that. So with residential appraisal, this is probably the appraisals that most people are kind of familiar with, where it's just, hey, I'm buying a house. I have to get an appraisal done to make sure that, the bank's willing to lend me the money for the property. A lot of that revolves around one kind of basis for offering that opinion of value, which is the comparable sales approach.
That's right.
Obviously, in commercial, there's two other approaches that may be better avenues. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about diving into the cost approach and then also maybe looking at the income approach, because those may be better avenues and better tools for some people. So kind of explain how the cost approach works and when that might be the best option for an appraisal that you may be doing.
Yeah, I think so. As far as the cost approach, at the core of it, it's a very simple process. One thing that does not depreciate is land,
right?
The ground beneath the improvement. So, you value the land, and then we need to know what is the cost new of the improvement. So, to the root of your question, when is the cost approach most applicable? It is with new constructions or newer constructions where the home or the commercial property hasn't had that much time to depreciate in value or in condition. So that to answer that question, new or newer construction in any sort of residential or commercial, I would always be looking at a cost approach.
Perfect. And then obviously the income approach is going to be something that's probably more utilized maybe for selling a business along with the real estate, but obviously not the only time that would be used. So kind of break down what the income approach looks like, just high level, and then when you would utilize that most often.
Yeah, so the income approach, again, I'll look at it for residential properties. You're really asking, what is the typical buyer?
Right.
Why is that buyer purchasing that home? And, being in, whether you're in Southwest Indiana or you're in California, there's plenty of investors that are purchasing real estate for income purposes.
Yeah.
And so from a residential standpoint, you typically try to use your available information, whether through the local MLS or conversations with local investors, and you try to figure out what that home or that property should rent for as far as market rent. And so in the residential world, you take that market rent times a gross rent multiplier, and that should give you an indication of value. Yeah,
and I want to hit on something that you said and kind of dive into. It's funny, I was sitting in continuing education last week or the week before. Time kind of flies, so I'm not exactly sure when it was, but we were talking about some appraisal issues and some things, and one of the people asked a question like, well, can appraisers use information outside of the MLS? And you just kind of hit the nail on the head on the front end. Like, if you're using the income approach or anything, you're going to talk to local investors to get some additional information. So through your due diligence, you're not just looking at MLS data. You're going through and looking at all the available sources, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When you really dive into the investor market, we'll stick with Southwest Indiana. I mean, Facebook alone, there's so many avenues where investors are intermingling and sharing data and sharing conversations, sharing buying opportunities, renting opportunities. So an appraiser, you got to have your pulse on the market. So you got to get in there, you got to get your feet a little dirty and have conversations and figure out what is going on in the market. So yeah, MLS is a starting point.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I tell people a lot of times. I was trying to value a property for a market analysis for a client one time, and the area I searched, the MLS just didn't have a lot of data, and it was because it was in an area that had a lot of rentals that had just kind of been sold off market back and forth, and so I took the time to do a lot of digging into just the public record to find that stuff. Mm-hmm. And people don't realize how much information is actually out there, and doing that extra work and going that extra mile, you can really get a good basis of knowledge from what's happening in the market.
Oh yeah. Going, like you said, public records. We are a disclosure state in Indiana, so it's amazing what you can find through your county assessor website.
Absolutely. I've got a buddy who's a realtor out in New Mexico, and they don't have any of that information. Yep. And so we were having a conversation one time. He's like, how do you find comps off market and all this stuff? And I was like, oh, we're a disclosure state. I find everything. And he's like, that would be amazing if I had an opportunity to do that. I
don't think I could appraise in a state like New Mexico.
Yeah, it would be complicated to say the least.
Yeah.
So, I've benefited a lot from our relationship over the past few years, because I think that I pride myself on thinking outside of the box. And most real estate professionals and most consumers only think of an appraiser as someone who handles that process of a purchase, that they're doing the value at that point in time. But I've been very happy to be able to pick up the phone and give you a call whenever I'm working on a problem market analysis and say, give me some insight. How often do other people pick up the phone and ask those questions, maybe before they're even in the appraisal process, and kind of build that relationship to make sure they're taking care of their clients?
Well, I would say it doesn't happen as much as it should.
That was my fear, to be honest with you.
And I guess I'm here in outlets like today to promote the fact that appraisers can be in a friendly face, and you should pick up the phone and call them.
Yeah, they're not always the guy who's killing the deal, right?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
Whenever I'm trying to work on a problem, I think it's great that I can ask those kind of questions, because you've obviously got a lot more experience viewing a lot more different properties and utilizing USPAP, or Universal Standard. I can't even remember what Universal
Standards for Professional Appraisal Practice.
That's why I have the appraiser here, people. So utilizing that stuff, how I can kind of look at the data that I'm presented with and kind of give me some guidance on that. How much have you charged me for, just having conversations in the past?
Big fat zero.
Big fat zero. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And having that resource, I think, as a real estate professional, is really doing my job and my diligence for my clients. So I know you've done a lot of education and stuff. What would be the message you want to send to real estate agents to kind of help them get those numbers in place, as opposed to finding problems on the back end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, whether it's talking, my phone's always on, so feel free to call me, but make a contact with an appraiser in your market and inform that relationship. And a statement I would have for any appraiser is to make those phone calls to realtors and try to be a friendly face, because just like you complimented me, I'll compliment you, Aaron. You are actively dealing with buyers and sellers every day, and you see that side of the real estate transaction. So I need to dive into your brain and figure out what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis, because that's going to be the market reaction for a typical buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that has really changed since 2008, we had the Dodd-Frank Act that changed truth in lending and all these different things. So regulations came in that really kind of limited the way that appraisers are contacted throughout the purchase process. Right. At least on residential. I assume it's probably similar on commercial. I don't know for a fact. But these days, we have to go through an appraisal management company to order the actual appraisal. And a lot of people feel like, as real estate professionals, they're no longer allowed to talk to appraisers. So I've got a house that's listed. You're the person who calls me to set up the appraisal, and a lot of people are like, I can't tell them anything. It's $10,000 over asking price, but I don't know what to do to help them understand what's going on. as a real estate professional, am I allowed to offer some insight on what drove the price up potentially over asking price and kind of some of the information that may be valuable to you preparing that report?
Yeah, I think the regulatory changes of 2008, they force appraisers and they force other market participants to stay in line. But the bottom line is my job is I'm not going to let you, and I'm not allowed to let you or a lender influence my value opinion, but unduly.
Right.
But if you can, I would encourage any real estate agent that it is your opportunity to provide me with your thought process, with concrete data, with those comparable sales that supported your opinion or your conclusion that the home or whatever property is worth what you claim it to be.
Yeah. Comparable sales. I want to touch on that for a second because I do a lot of educating for our new agents and a lot of training at Tucker, and picking comps is always one of those things that's misunderstood by the clients mostly, but even some new agents. If I'm looking at, say, a ranch home with a basement that's located in an area that has a vast array of differing kind of properties, you think I should use that 2-story across the street that's 10 or 20 years newer as a comp when I'm trying to justify my value on something?
Yeah, absolutely not. I do not think that's appropriate. Location. So location is important.
Right.
It needs to be accounted for, but there's a multitude of things that we're looking for in terms of a comparable sale.
Yeah. Kind of give a breakdown of like the most important factors. Obviously, location's on the table, so you don't want to go find something in Indianapolis to compare to Evansville, Indiana.
That's right.
But, architectural style, age, those kind of things, those play a big role, right?
Yeah, we've touched base on a typical buyer a couple times already. Yeah. So typical buyer, you're in the historic district of downtown Evansville. Mm-hmm. That's a very niche neighborhood with, the most beautiful architecture in the city is down there. So perhaps I don't want to search for your brick ranch on a basement on the east side of Evansville to compare to a Queen Victorian home in historic downtown Evansville. So like you said, design, size, the gross living area, and by gross living area, I mean any finished space above grade, and basements below grade. All that stuff comes into play.
You open the door to my next question because I hear people all the time say, well, basements don't count towards the value. And I'm like, no, absolutely they count towards the value, just not the same way as above grade square footage. So can you kind of dispel that myth a little bit where people are like, well, it's got a basement, but that doesn't really count?
Yeah, I think one of those points of contentions between realtors and appraisers is, we'll stick with residential. We typically value a residential property on a price per unit. And by that, I mean, if a home sells for $200,000, that brick ranch with a finished basement, that's our example for today.
Right.
I'm going to make adjustments to the $200,000 as opposed to, for this imaginary example, the $125 per square foot.
Right.
And so within that $200,000, I'm looking at the finished basement. I'm looking at the site size, the size of the land, the size of the home, and all that is being accounted for.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but on a price per square foot, you're still looking at the price per square foot for the above grade.
MLS wise, yeah. And then you get all these other websites that just decide however they want to do it. And it's like, well, why does it say it's $200 a square foot here, but it's only $100 a square foot here? And I'm like, well, because a lot of that square footage is in the basement and they're not calculating it appropriately. And that's where you get it. And so I think that's part of the reason people misunderstand that gross living area. That kind of leads me into another question. Gross living area is obviously something that is important to know when you're marketing a property, whether that, obviously gross living area wouldn't be what you call it in commercial, but actual square footage space is something that's important to know. I don't know if you know this, Sam, but public records aren't always 100% accurate.
That's what they say.
Yeah. There's been plenty of times where I've gone into a home and I can tell just by walking through it, something doesn't add up here. Property card says it's this, but I can tell it's not 100%. I don't want to take on the liability of measuring that house by myself. Is that something that I could call an appraiser? Because you guys have standards that you have to utilize for measuring. Would that be a service that you could offer so I'm not taking that liability on and making a mistake?
Yeah. Hey, one of the best things, or one of the changes that's come about of the appraisal industry and the lending industry within the last year is every appraiser to follow lending guidelines is to measure a home. They call it per ANSI standards. And that is just a fancy acronym for, we're all going to measure it the same way.
Right.
So, I find there to be two benefits. The realtor they remove themselves from the liability of where that calculation
I definitely don't want it.
Put it on the appraiser. They should be measuring their homes per ANSI standards. But then another thing is you can have difficult conversations if your potential client is dead set that public records, it's a public document. It says it's that. And you don't want to have that education process or difficult conversation. Pass the buck to the appraiser. Tell them to come out. You say, we'll have a trained professional come out and measure your home, and we'll just remove any doubt. So then we'll get the right answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having that ability to find that professional to take care of it, not only removing the liability, but showing that, hey, I want to make sure that I'm giving you the absolute best service, because unless we get a cash buyer who's waiving an appraisal, is going to end up getting measured by somebody with ANSI standards anyway. So why not just go ahead and eliminate that question on the front end?
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously you do a lot of work with banks, appraisal management companies, that kind of thing, for valuing homes and properties when they're being purchased. What other times would be a good time to reach out to an appraiser for understanding a value of something? Maybe I'm in a position where I'm not trying to sell anything, but it'd be good to have an actual certified appraisal done on the property.
Yeah, life happens. There are times with attorneys that you're always going to need an appraisal with any time with death or a divorce, in a multitude of other situations. Those are common times that we will be contracted for some private appraisal work. And then, for homeowners that think they can sell on their own for sell by owner, I've been contracted plenty of times by just getting an idea of where the starting point is for them. Yeah,
and I think a lot of real estate professionals don't necessarily want to encourage for sell by owners. And I'm the kind of guy that I'm like, hey, my job's not here to tell people they can't do something on their own. It's to help educate them and help them understand that if they need a professional, we're here to do that. Yeah. And knowing that there's a place that those people can turn to get an idea of value is still something I think is imperative to share, whether they're going to list the home or not. I want somebody to know they're doing the right thing and getting the right value, as opposed to just throwing a number out there and seeing what sticks.
Yeah. Like you said, how much have I ever charged you for advice? Zero.
Exactly.
Being an authentic person and being willing to pass up work or not force, pressure someone into listing or using your services, I think goes a long way in this industry.
Yeah, 100%. And to be honest, because of the fact that you've been willing to share that information, there's been several times where I've had some of those situations where we need an appraisal done that isn't going to go through an AMC, and you're always one of the people at the top of my list to give out a name, because A, I know that you're going to be willing to give them the information they need, and B, I know you're going to do a good job and be fair in the appraisal process.
No, I appreciate that.
No problem. Technology has impacted every aspect of the real estate industry. Over the 17 years that I've been in, or 18 years almost now, that I've been in the business, we've gone from the triplicate contracts to signing most of our stuff electronically. Mm-hmm. We've had the implication of the online valuation models. I don't want to put any specific one on blast, but you see that these algorithms and these things come into play that have really impacted what people expect of real estate professionals, because they're like, well, this website says my home's worth this. And I'm like, well, they weren't in your house. They didn't do these things. So I know technology technology and innovation has impacted what I do on a daily basis. How has that hit the appraisal industry?
Yeah, gosh, the amount of seminars I've seen floating across the internet on ChatGPT coming into our workspace is it's terrifying. But like you said, you have to be willing to adapt and tackle those challenges. So, we're open to it, and we just try to stay on top of it as best we can.
With ChatGPT, it's one of those things that I hear people saying all the time, oh, it's going to put attorneys, appraisers, and real estate professionals out of business. And my answer to that is, it's going to put some of them out of business. But the people who understand and work with the technology are going to be able to improve their business overall, because I'll be honest, I use ChatGPT to analyze the questions I plan to ask you today to help me get an idea of what are some good topics and am I asking the right ones. I had a list already prepared, and I asked ChatGPT to give me a list. I'm like, where are the overlaps? How do I make sure that I'm doing the right things?
That's right.
So I think there's a lot of things that we can all do to better our business. And I'm like you. I'm like, hey, it's coming. It's changing. I think there's opportunities for the people who are going to adapt and do the right things. And I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah. I don't know if you slept through your Microsoft Excel courses in college or not.
But, I did them all.
I tell you what, ChatGPT can be a friend with extrapolating data. And we're always looking at data in the real estate industry. So, yeah, I'm trying my best to stay with the times.
Absolutely. I know we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, so I wanted to touch on this a little bit because it's one of those things that is drastically important in valuing a property. I just learned in continuing education that there are now opportunities for these data collection specialists to try and help, air quotes, with the process of collecting photos and information about properties for appraisers who don't visit the site themselves. I personally see a lot of pitfalls and drawbacks on that, and I kind of wanted to get your opinion on that as an appraiser on how important it is to actually physically go to the property yourself to help inform that opinion of value.
Yeah, like we were talking about with technology, to stay relevant in the industry, you have to be willing to adapt. I think this data collection period we're entering into is a direct result of COVID. Yeah. It maybe started with safety, but in reality, it turned into speed. Yeah. And I believe this is an opportunity for the lending industry to try to speed up the appraisal process, to speed up closing and the real estate transaction as a whole. Some of the pitfalls of data collectors is appraisers are legally responsible for every aspect of that appraisal, of that physical inspection by a data collector. And my understanding is we're never going to know who the data collector is and their credentials and experience. And I think
talk about liability. And when you're putting a value on a home and we're responsible for 100% of the property inspection that we were not physically there for, it's murky waters we're navigating into. Yeah, to say the least. The reason it kind of stood out to me is as I was saying earlier, is I have a lot of agents that when they're working on a tough market analysis to try to advise a client on what an asking price should be, and they're showing me photos, I can't always tell from a photo exactly what I'm looking at. Now, cameras are great and everything else, but laminate countertops these days, some of them, I can't tell if it's granite, quartz, laminate, just by looking at a photo. And obviously the difference in those materials is going to impact my value. And that's tangible things that are in the photos. Yeah. There's some intangibles that are definitely present in some properties, like aromas. We'll go with aromas as opposed to odors at times. So for me, I would be terrified to rely on someone else going into a property and missing a lot of those intangible things that are going to impact my opinion. Wouldn't you think that's not just, hey, I don't know their credentials, I don't know who they are, but what am I missing that they're seeing or smelling or hearing or other things that may impact what I'm thinking?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure as with all your years of listing homes, you know that a camera angle is imperative to make a good photograph. Well, I want to see all the details as an appraiser. I want to see the good, I want to see the bad and the ugly. So, you know, what am I missing exactly? You take a photo from one side of the room and everything looks okay, but on the other side, it's not so good. So,
you know, it just pops in my head. I'm a nerd. I'll just call it what it is. I'm a huge nerd. And New Rockstars is a YouTube channel that I enjoy watching. And they like to break down movies. And they'll talk about specific things. And they were recently doing a breakdown of X-Men First Class. And they were talking about a shot where it's Kevin Bacon's character where he's talking to young Magneto. And it just looks like they're sitting in an office and having a conversation. And from one camera angle, that's all you see. And then it cuts to the other camera angle where you see this room that's just filled with all these medical tools and experimentation things, and it's like it completely changes the entire perspective of the space. And that's immediately what popped into my head when you were talking about the camera angles can hide a lot of things, and I'm like, horrific things at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will have to we'll have to do another podcast in a year and see what the ramifications are of this process. So
absolutely.
At this point, it's all an unknown.
Yeah. Like I said, it was one of those things I didn't know even existed until a week or two ago, and now I'm just wrapping my head around all kinds of potential problems that may unravel. So,
absolutely.
I think that kind of hits all of the stuff that I wanted to touch on today. Is there anything specifically that you want to pass along that you think would be valuable for someone, whether it's a consumer or a real estate professional, to know about just the appraisal process or having conversations with an appraiser throughout the transaction?
I think we've talked about it, but let's really hammer it down. I think you find an appraiser friend. It's a good ally to have, whether you're a real estate professional or you're just a homeowner or you're interested in being a homeowner. Finding an appraiser you trust and you want to have you can always call for bounce an idea off someone's head. That's imperative, and that's probably what I would recommend the most. So I think you would say the same thing for having a realtor friend on your side, and it couldn't be more true.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. Sam, I appreciate you coming in today. This was great information, and I'll be looking forward to our conversation in a year on how this technology change is impacting things.
Good deal. I appreciate it.
Thanks.